Good morning, everyone, and today we're checking out a brand new video from the Goji Center, and it's about that challenge that's been circulating online about the 100 men versus one gorilla. Alright, let's see some science behind this. Let's
A
go.
100 men versus one gorilla? This shouldn't even be a debate, bro. The gorilla is winning every single.
Who would win in a fight, a gorilla or 100 men?
Everyone keeps saying the gorillas would win, but actually the men would
Who
win.
would win in a fight out of 100 men and a gorilla? I
That's a lot
can't
of
even believe
skulls.
I'm answering this, but
100%. 100 men can take down a silverback.
I think I can take one gorilla.
600 pounds.
600 pounds?
100 dudes could take one single gorilla.
Well, that certainly was not a question we had on our.
No, the first thing that would happen is that the first guy is going to be taken down or killed, probably have his neck snapped and his meat ripped off, then he's going to be swung around by a leg or arm being used to batter away everyone else, i.e., he's going to hit every other motherfucker with another motherfucker.
Our 2025 bingo card. So, can 100 humans beat one gorilla?
I don't
what
know.
If we tenfold ourselves against just one of our most powerful living relatives? Today at Goji Center, we are going to tackle this
cousins, but
bizarre
yeah.
subject that has been sending shockwaves through the internet and see what kind of scenarios we can cook up. If you're curious to see what the horrible aftermath will be, then stay tuned, because no matter who wins today, it's gonna get ugly. The way we're going to approach this is by first stating that no matter how you look at it, this isn't a yes or no answer. There are different factors that come into play that may heavily dictate the inevitable bloody outcome. Therefore, we will look at this from 3 different perspectives, 3 scenarios, 3 fights. This funny scenario is fictional because it involves animal and human behavior as well as some serious safety concerns. 100 rational people are not about to decide to throw caution out the window and bum rush the most powerful primate on the planet. And fighting a human...
My god, news stations have been covering this? No, I think the news has more shit to cover than bullshit on the
Let
internet.
alone a horde of them, is just about the last thing a gorilla wants. Gorillas are actually quite peaceful herbivores in most scenarios, but they and
could
other
fuck
apes
us
are
up.
pretty perceptive.
They
Just
don't.
like them, humans have 2 arms, 2 legs, opposable thumbs, no tail, smell,
Ooh, that was
and
impressive.
sound like them to some degree. Essentially speaking, gorillas can tell that we're apes too and don't see us as a threat most of the time. Just weird-looking neighbors. That said, they can get especially violent and are pretty well aware of what weaknesses we have. Sum that knowledge up with
Discombobulate.
strength incomparable to that of a human, and you have a perfect recipe for disaster. To test this scenario out and to make an educated analysis for today's episode, we found a brave volunteer who
victim.
was willing to be
I
our
love that.
crash test dummy. Meet Riot, a YouTuber who kindly accepted our proposal to be cloned 99 times and lead the charge against the gorilla. But who exactly? To make this a more realistic scenario, we're going to use a full-grown male gorilla, given that they
just
are
makes
the most
sense.
sexually dimorphic of all apes, and Riot is a gentleman who wouldn't want to throw hands with a lady. To juice up our simulations with the required data, let's start with the stats. We'll use one of the largest gorillas ever recorded, since it is going up against a monumental pile of human. This one, recorded in 1938 from the
Lord.
secluded misty mountains of Kivu, with an upright stance of almost 2 meters or 6.2 inches tall, and tipping the scales
That's
at about
pretty tall.
220 kilos or 490 pounds. This massive
about
ape
500.
towered over most people, despite apes having typically short legs for their body size. Other potential records show some wild males of multiple species of gorilla could break 250 to 260 kilograms. That's
damn.
over a quarter of a ton. Waiting in line for our next scenario is someone who might ring a bell. As for a ridiculous meme, we might as well have a ridiculous amount of audacity. So, humanity's opponent will be one of the most notorious apes in history,
Oh, yeah?
whose fame was by no means intentions of his own.
Oh,
one
no.
of the most infamous former residents of the Cincinnati Zoo and
The moment they said, famous be out of his control, whatever the hell, I knew it's gonna be Mother Damn Harambe.
named after Rita Marley's song, Harambe, back for revenge
Oh,
and
crap.
eager to take it out on the human race.
He's
Standing
pissed.
at 5'10" and weighing 440 pounds, Harambe was, or for this test, is a western lowland gorilla. This species was perhaps destined for eternal memedom, as the scientific name for this species is, and no, we're not making this up, gorilla, gorilla, gorilla. At about 17
That's actually what this species is called, just gorilla, gorilla, gorilla? Oh, fucking
years old, Harambe
perfect.
would have been at his physical prime. So, what will our gorillas bring into the battle? Well, let's begin by clearing the air here with setting the record straight with the bite. You may have heard the bite force of 1300 psi. This kind of chomping pressure would be greater than the vast majority of even larger land carnivores, like some gigantic brown bears, twice as heavy as the great apes. And,
wow.
this metric is just not quite accurate. We'll be citing a
Damn it, because of this having so much gorilla in my brain's now just playing that whole meme of life good, ride wife. If wife fights back, kill wife. If life's sad. And, like, if you've seen that, you know what the hell I'm talking about.
Published by the American Journal of Anthropology.
Oh my
which
God.
looked into the anatomy and workings of ape jaws, including humans. So this will come in handy. The study found that the actual biting pressure for a gorilla was
What the hell's up with that top plate?
substantially
weird.
smaller, with a total muscle force of 4,000 newtons distributed across the molars at around 527 pounds per square inch. Still more than enough to bite through bamboo like we would carrots. But if this was focused on these enlarged canine things that slide past each other in a self-sharpening motion, the pressure increases to around
Ooh.
1,179 psi. Now,
Oh, damn.
granted, Harambe was an above-average-sized gorilla, so it is possible.
I'm sorry, but every time he says gorilla, 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 my brain, is that some kind of song? Hold on. Okay, no, there's no song out there anywhere apparently on the internet of someone just going gorilla, gorilla, gorilla.
His chomping numbers were higher than the average study.
Oh, I'm probably thinking of that old, like, Boomerang commercial, Manila Gorilla. Manila Gorilla. That's what I'm thinking of. Oh my god, talk about the flashback. Man, I haven't seen that added in over 12 years!
Studied individuals in the study. But we'll play safe and round up to the flat number of 4,100 newtons, 530 psi at the molars, and 1,200 on the canines. Believe it or not, during a fight to the death, leveraging our own chompers can prove lethal. It is
Surprisingly.
admittedly an unorthodox method of dispatching an enemy, but
damn it,
is
Mike Tyson.
inevitably and very likely that at least one of our clones will resort to deploying the pearly whites in the midst of close quarter combat. For this episode,
So
we asked
brutal.
Riot to provide some specs regarding his own mandibles to get an educated guess on whether or not this bite will make a dent on a gorilla this massive. Other members of the homini, such as Australopithecus, had fairly
Hey, that's
impressive
Lucy.
bite forces, despite their small size. Homo sapiens are an example of sacrificed jaw strength to allow the skull to give more room to our own primary weapon,
The brain.
Factoring metrics taken from multiple men and our friend Riot, his biting force would be approximately, at an above average, 835 newtons or 198 psi at full crunch. That said, biting may
Okay.
be the very last thing our brave friend wants to do, given the gape of a human skull is so much smaller than a gorilla's.
Oh, yeah, no,
and
that's
seemingly
fucked.
Riot lacks any fangs to puncture into the ape's fur and skin. Biting the neck might result in breaking the jaw from overextending if the gorilla thrashed and yanked. We'll add this info into our simulation and move on to the other two weapons our gorillas will bring
Gorilla,
into the
gorilla,
pit.
gorilla.
Gorilla strength is something that is widely exaggerated, with some hearsay statements that make it sound like the apes are from Krypton rather
That's
than the Congo
AI,
and
yeah.
heft around 10 times their body weight. The reality is that gorillas
Yellow
do have a
gorilla,
lot
that
more
was
upper
it.
body strength than humans due to large muscle density and fast twitch muscles, much more mass on the arms, and more rigid joints to maximize strength at the cost of some dexterity. The reason we can't easily lift up stuff many times our body weight is the same reason they cannot throw objects as well and manipulate tools as easily as we can. Gorillas don't throw accurate punches like many people claim on the internet.
No, they
Rather, they
swing.
swing their arms like a pair of sledgehammers and tend to aim for blows to the upper body and smacks to the head.
Uh-huh.
Considering that
That's it.
each arm and shoulder accounts for 15% of a gorilla's mass, and being conservative to play it fair,
Oh,
we
damn.
can estimate an ape like Harambe could bludgeon arm strikes at over 6 to 12,000 newtons of force.
Oh, damn.
Enough to crack the skull with a well-placed swipe or break many ribs. All this in a matter of a second. Not to mention the ability for the gorilla to wrap its entire hand around our relatively thin arms and legs and yank them off the socket with pretty much low effort. Our good friend Riot, meanwhile, does have some boxing
geez.
experience under
Okay.
his belt. The average human can throw a swing of about 750 newtons. Technique and strength play a huge factor, with
That
slugging
actually is
boxers
true.
able to produce multiple times that force in
Like an untrained person that could probably do like the 700 I said. A properly trained person could probably do up to probably 1,300.
Heated tests.
So I don't know.
Our test subject here was able to produce an impressive 1,000 to 1,300
Oh my god, I
newtons
just
of
figured that
striking
out.
force. Kicks would
1,300.
also be a valid option as well, as long as whoever winds up that kick doesn't mind risking it all on attack that could severely backfire. At 2,500 to 3,000 newtons of force with one well-placed kick,
Ooh.
is this enough to incapacitate a gorilla though? Really, the only near-effective placement for these blows would be
Ooh.
on the skull. This maneuver is mostly inflicted on
Get
the
down.
zygomatic, parietal, and occipital bones, jaw, and neck. On a gorilla, this would land here. With far superior bone density at about 3 times thicker and more dense muscle padding on its face than humans, it's likely that this blow would just piss off the gorilla even more, bringing far
Oh, yeah.
more adverse effects. Lastly, let's talk about a weapon some may not even think about. Mass. Yes, carrying a lot of meat has its benefits. Mix that with a fast
Surprisingly,
moving
yeah.
speed and you have a lethal weapon of
Look at
ass
that,
destruction.
cracked it.
Harambe weighs 200 kilograms, moving at an average speed of around 20 miles per hour. Considering that the front part of the body will be striking the victim, and we're talking about 11,673 newtons of force, 110 to 117 kilopascals. Ribs fracture at 50 to 80 kilopascals, and skulls fracture at around 100. Meaning if you and your buddies happen to be in the way of an enraged gorilla, you would all go down like bowling pins with potentially broken ribs and air knocked out of you. That's a few riots temporarily out of commission in less
Oh,
than a
God.
second. So now that we've got our basic stats, let's begin to draw out our 3 scenarios. Riot. Species, Homo sapiens sapiens. Height, 1.8 meters.
okay.
Mass, 90 kilograms. Reach, 0.74 meters or 2 feet 5 inches. Striking force, 1,000 to 3,000 newtons. 2,500 to 3,000 newtons on a kick. Bite force, 198 psi. Harambe.
Not bad.
Species, gorilla. Height, 1.78 meters.
Okay, I gotta tell my mom that that is an actual species, and we can laugh the hell about it.
Mass 200 kilograms. Reach 1.2 meters or 4 feet. Striking force, a bash of 6 to 12,000 newtons. Bite force 530 to 1,200 psi with canines. So, we have the king of the meme apes against our rioting army. From this perspective, it should be a
Right
pretty simple
thing, I
answer,
get it.
right? Well, it gets a little more complicated depending on the scenario. Scenario number 1, the gauntlet route. In this one, we take the question as a gauntlet endurance match. Harambe is cornered in a long hallway with the rioting army advancing at him one at a time. Since the gorilla wouldn't
Like a damn
initially see
video
the
game.
humans as a threat, the first riot clone is tasked to provoke Harambe and strike for...
Ooh, nope,
Damn.
dead. Already.
Guys,
Dead.
are we really shooting this shit? No, seriously, we might get in trouble. Go on with the sin.
He's already dead.
Alright, yeah, got it. Wait, hold on. I think this guy was the real one. No, man, no, we don't. Alright, so as we continue the sim with these
But you did say you only cloned him 99 times, so that means the real one has to be somewhere in there.
clones, you'll find that even as the immortal unit Riot makes its advance, human anatomy and a clone of 200 pounds with less reach is just not going to cut it against an animal more than twice the weight and with many times the punching force. Our skull cannot
He's
handle this
dead.
much trauma, and given that gorillas do happen to target the most vulnerable points in our body, we're practically cooked, with each clone getting an impact that would turn the
spin kick?
underlying bone and organs into mush. At this point, Harambe knows what the next one will do, and without hesitation literally plows through without having to spend valuable energy and attention turning and covering his flanks. Initially, this looks like a certain victory, but here's the catch. If the clone army can keep its wits about seeing themselves marching into certain death one right after the other, they actually might have endurance on their side.
Ooh,
One major
maybe.
difference between Homo sapiens and gorillas is how we deplete ourselves from energy. Strength versus stamina is the name of the game today. And under the right circumstances, one may come out on top. Assuming that
Damn.
Harambe does use explosive muscle power burns all throughout, after maybe a few dozen fatalities, Harambe may feel the burn of fatigue and run out of juice to dish out heavy blows.
And eventually
From
he
there
gets too
on,
tired.
submission holds and strangling would be the next best option. This, however, puts our human subjects in range of, you guessed it,
The bite.
these. Now, it takes a lot less energy to bite down than to use an entire arm. After all, it takes very little bite force from a gorilla to kill a human, whether it's biting through the skull, neck, or severing an artery that would inevitably cause death. Now, it is possible that the gorilla may figure out that tearing up a human doesn't take that
Hey, if one of those rights can actually get on his back, they could go for an eye.
much energy. It may begin to dish out less stronger blows and conserve its energy. Now, it's important to note that against this kind of opponent,
I mean, it'd
no
be brutal
amount of
as
combat
hell, but
skill will help you in a
what you
situation
do.
where you're head-on against a gorilla. Attempting to block these blows is pointless. However, 100 people is 20,000 pounds of people, and despite claims that a gorilla would absolutely dominate in this scenario, at best we would have 100 dead riots and a bone-tired, close to dead from exhaustion Harambe. The mean gorilla barely wins this round. That is,
Barely,
if it
yeah.
decides to go berserk. But the other two come with a very interesting set of factors.
Ooh, whoa, what the?
Scenario
is
number
real.
2, the sane game. If there is one thing,
Okay,
at least
okay.
across a vast majority of humans and all animals, is that we don't like dying. Getting a game over from life is something every thinking animal almost always tries to avoid. We can see this in nature, and it's one of the biggest reasons having numbers on your side doesn't always guarantee you a win.
Yeah, not
Mother
always.
Nature already tells us how men versus gorilla would likely go. Hyenas usually have standoffs with lions. Wolves also have standoffs with grizzlies. And in
Oh,
theory,
wow.
it would take around 3 to 4 of these to take down the big guy. But why don't they most of the time? Because it only takes a grizzly bear a few moments to seriously cripple or kill a wolf. And who is the next
Yeah.
suicidal one who wants to come next? Scenario number 2 takes place in a
It would literally just be like, no, well, we're done, closing up.
wide
Goodbye.
room with enough space to
This.
house a brawl between 100 riots and
out.
one gorilla. The rules of engagement: no tools, no places to hide or climb, a flat arena with no terrain advantages. Here's where superior human intellect and that extra space in our skulls comes in handy. Strategy. We
Ooh,
asked Riot
all right.
what his strategy would be and also surveyed a few hundred folks as to what they deemed to be
Surround the gorilla and jumping on. Surprisingly, that actually is kind of clever though.
the better strategy based on the most common
Okay, I'll
tactics
take
we
the
were able
eyes.
to gather from
Oh my God! So he just said someone's going for the nutsack.
the internet. The most popular and resorted to strategy was surrounding the gorilla and all going in at once. Initially, this scenario seems favorable to us humans.
Jump that mother
We have a
effer.
problem that may tilt the odds catastrophically. Something that, dare we say, the majority of people tend to ignore is factoring in self-preservation. That is, the act of tapping out of a situation when things don't look favorable. Here's how this works. The gorilla would obviously not be comfortable seeing that 100 humans are taking position around him, and then they all begin to rush. Any animal in this situation would immediately have alarm bells going off in its brain and activate fight or flight mode. This charge isn't going to register in the gorilla's brain as a giant group hug. So the gorilla here
Oh,
is
yeah,
already
no.
prepared to throw hands. And when it throws them, all strategy has also been thrown off the equation.
Oh, there goes the
Despite having
John
a set
Eye.
plan to practically dogpile the gorilla, humans will not have the willingness to be the first 12 to actually undergo the 100% chance of getting pummeled into ground meat. In all realism, it will actually look like this. And the gorilla here is already fired up. The preceding sequence of events will be described as an absolute slaughter, with demoralized
Yeah.
humans running, trying to avoid being the next one mauled. Now, realistically, in this scenario, a gorilla does not have sufficient stamina to run around and chase every single one. It's
No, it
likely
would-
that after
it
the
does
first
not.
5 down, the people will back off, and in the act, allowing the gorilla to have a breather, regaining its stamina to fend off the next wave of suicidal riots who think
Uh-oh.
their buddy is actually going to follow through with said wave. This confrontation will take hours at this rate. With every man down, the chances of taking out this gorilla and being granted an exit off the arena diminish greatly. With Harambe
Jeez.
picking out random people off one by one, none brave enough to be the next to die. But at the end, after many hours, perhaps days, Harambe will come out as the undisputed winner of this battle, with the
And so
determining
far it's
factor
won
here
2
being
out
a
of
loss
3.
of morale. Yes, fear is one of those things that spreads. All it takes is one wimp, and then the sentiment multiplies. But let's pretend for a moment that this wasn't a factor, and we found a way to properly motivate the Riot Army to actually fight to the death.
Oh
Ron,
my God.
where are you on this stance?
Listen, the bottom line is this. 100 men, assuming they're all healthy in their 20s, and they are going to be united, understanding that there's going to be collateral damage.
That will
A few
be
of the
death.
guys aren't going to make it.
Scenario number 3.
Absolute
insanity.
insanity.
In
Oh.
scenario number 2,
yeah.
the biggest weakness ironically ended up springing up out of our biggest strength. The big problem is that the humans were too sane, too aware of the brutal consequences, and decided not to engage. So, for this scenario, we'll fix that by injecting him and his clones with every psychedelic and stimulant drug known to man that can cause violent outbursts and hallucinations.
So now it's 100 completely high as balls human men against one gorilla.
To the fact that Riot himself admitted that his self-preservation is practically non-existent based on his previous combat experience. This will be added into the sim. Now, with effectively an army full of coked-up bath salt zombies, we turned the fresh army loose on the big aforementioned 490-pound gorilla. The ape on high alert, and at this point realizing that these humans are not here to take pictures, gallops around looking for an escape, but there is none. At greater range, and with many times more powerful swings, the first clone is immediately pulverized, followed by the second,
there it goes
third,
again.
fourth, fifth. However, it is at this point where the surrounding sane humans shit their pants. Their pants, however, remain spotless, clean, and the clones fixated on one objective: kill ape.
Kill
Fear
ape.
is no longer a factor, and the sixth and seventh clone grab the arms. Another wraps around the neck, and the dog pile begins.
Oh,
In
yeah.
this state, humans would likely resort to more unorthodox methods of attack, meaning bites are more
Like
frequent,
biting, yeah.
exposed fingers are bitten, and some skulls ripped off the neck. But the piling weight, increasing by hundreds of pounds each second, is too much to bear. According to our model, and taking into account the crushing weight of a
Here we go.
select number of 200-pound riots, the gorilla would perish under the weight of around 5 tons of human, smothered without the ability to expand
my
its
God.
chest cavity to breathe properly. But this did not come without a huge cost. Despite the crushing victory, the riots inflicted casualties on themselves too, with around 30 to 45
I mean, they're high as hell, of course.
individuals trampled to death or crushed under the weight of their fellow maniacs. So, to finally answer the question, can 100 slightly above average people defeat one gorilla?
No.
Can 100 suicidal maniacs win?
Yes.
Going further, we estimate that 100 is not even necessary given these specific circumstances. 30 riots with no self-preservation instinct might do the job. Now we just have to
Probably.
figure out if any of the surviving clones are the original and get Riot back to his channel after the drugs wear off. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. What the hell did you inject them with? What was that mixture? Alright everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Links to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of you folks next time when we flick back on. Until then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.